want to thank the Dodge Festival and Martin and David Mayhew and Jim Howard for the invitation. This is one of the moments that I look for every 2 years. I'm going to read from Leaving Saturn. I'm going to read 5 poems, 4 from the book, and the last poem, the first section is in the book, and it's one of these poems that keeps growing. And I want to open up with a poem called Blunts, of which I like to read whenever the kids ask me how did I begin writing poetry.
Erudite and down at the same time, serious.
Well, all right, Everett Hoagland on Major Jackson. What do you think of Major's recent book?
I think Major is a major brother, and anything he does is major. I think that he's a superb wordsmith, who craft-wise, who has taken the craft to really high art, and he represents his teachers, his background, his family, his politics, and his sensibilities superbly, and that's all combined in his work. He shares a life with you. All right, he says his truths, memorably, interestingly, and beautifully. What else should poetry do?
I know Everett's a storyteller. You guys, is he telling the truth?
He does tell the truth.
The first time I got high, I stood in a circle of boys at 23rd and Ridge, tucked inside a doorway that smelled of urine. It was March, the cold rains all but blurred our sight as we feigned sophistication, passing a bullet-shaped bottle of malt. Johnny Cash had a love for transcendental numbers and explained between puffs resembling little gas of air, the link to all creation was the mathematician. Malik, the smartest of the crew, counter-argued and cited the holy life of prayer as a gateway to the Islamic faith that was for all intents the true path for the righteous black man. No one disputed. Malik cocked his head, pinched the joint, and pulled so hard we imagined his lips crazy glued into stiff O's. It was long agreed that Lefty would inherit his father's used car business, thus destined for a life of rents. Then, amid a fit of coughing, I broke the silence. I want to be a poet. It was nearing dinner time. Jesus lived here. His sister was yelling at their siblings over the evening news and game shows. The stench of hot dogs and sauerkraut drifted down the dank hallway. A pre-spring wind flapped the plastic covering of a Junkman shopping cart as Eddie Hardrick licked left to right the thin strip of glue at the edge of a rolling paper, then uttered, "So, you want the tongue of God?" I bent double in the glade of smoke and looked up for help. It was too late. We were tragically hit.
Major Jackson is here with us, author of Leaving Saturn, old buddy from Philadelphia. Love to see him at the Dodge Festival and anywhere else. What did you think of Kate Russian's reading? Or more better, what are some of the highlights for you, a few highlights in your opinion of the Dodge Festival that you've seen this year? What makes this year's Dodge Festival a little different than others? Do you think it's moved forward, or have you seen new poets here that you haven't seen before that are coming out with a new message about the future, or what's your take on this year's fest?
My take is that the Poets Among Us part of the festival is probably as equally important as the big concert readings, primarily because they do reveal to us the next generation of young poets that are coming up, or poets who haven't hit that level of familiarity, and just lets us know that it's alive. More importantly, they also reveal increasingly the degree to which writing poetry and teaching poetry has become legitimate and humane means by which to live one's life, and I'm very appreciative of that. I have met new poets, poets that were unfamiliar with, Jim Clark, John Freeman, a woman named Susie Clary, all great writers whose name I never heard of. Now I'm out to buy their books, and I was part of
Reading with
big
Miranda Fields
right,
and Jim
Miranda
Clark,
Fields, yeah, indeed. Guy named Ken Waltman, Alaskan poet, and that's the other great thing about the Dodge Festival is that it's not a regional showcase of poets, but
National
it
and
truly,
international.
definitely, you can't sneeze at a poet like Adam Zagajewski or nod your head.
Right.
You have to pay attention
Right.
to what Eastern European poets are writing about their experiences and engaging in the great dialogue of what it means to be human and living at this particular historical moment in time. Since last year, I've heard a lot of poets read poems to September 11th on that occasion, and it's been very difficult for me. I'm one of the poets that needs distance. But as I sit and listen to them read their poems, I often think, wow, the poem before or after the poem that they read could have served as their September 11th poem, as if we have been writing against that moment. That's what poetry has been doing. So I'm going to lie and say this is my September 11th poem. Indian song. Freddie Hubbard's playing the cassette deck, 40 miles outside haze, and I've looked at this Kansas sunset for 3 hours now, almost bristling as big rigs bounce and grumble along I-70. At this speed, cornfields come in splotches, murky yellows and greens, budding the road shoulder, the flat wealth of the nation whirring by. It's a kind of ornamentation I'd gotten used to, as in a dream, espaliered against the skies blazing, cloud lufts cascade lace-like darkening whole fields. 30,000 feet above, someone is buttering a muffin, someone stares at a sky phone, and momentarily a baby cries in pressurized air. Through double-paned squares, someone squints, fields cross-hatched by asphalt strips. It is said Cezanne looked at a landscape so long, he felt as if his eyes were bleeding. No matter that, I'm heading west. It's all so redolent, this wailing music. By my side, you fingering fields of light, sunflowers over earth, miles traveled, a patchwork of goodbyes.
As the crow flies, so will it fall. Come sun up, say, or sun down, and a neighbour's brutish dog go carrying it off to worry it all day, as if it were its own foot broken. And the cat who tastes her kitten's salt-glazed pelts, the watery blood flora on the bottom of the box, she eats the afterbirth, her goblin damson. She stains the cold spires of her teeth, but keeps her white coat clean. So ninny, wandering, deluded mooncalf Cora, white lady of Finchley, can call her daughter, can sing to her through dusk, my little girl. In colourless dresses, stockings, gloves, in geisha makeup, Cora frames herself archangel. But archangels aren't female, but fictional, but oblivious to this. Poor simple mind, poor solid body. Her shopping basket bulges, eggs, coupons, gizzards for her girl. But I've dreamed of transubstantiation also. I keep my armory intact. As you keep your brain at its scatterpearl tasks, your body on its tense string, but then your blood escapes. You've let it go. You've ruined your good white things. And strong brine might lighten the stain, but leaves its residue, a rosy watermark, to float like fat in the soup on every white field in the drawer, rogue nighttime among the daylight things. Oh, Cora knows. The heart creates its quarry. Origamis, folds in frogs and cranes and crows, the flatness facing it. It aims its arrows, cuts an eye hole, a stone's throw in the huge opaque. You shape your kill, and what you've known comes down, falls far from you, wherever it will. Subway. I used to commute very, very late at night between Manhattan and Brooklyn. I used to wait tables, and I'd be there at 3 or 4 in the morning. I wrote this poem after one night. It was very, very dark. I was alone on the subway platform, so I thought, until I noticed a young guy on the very far platform enjoying, shall we say, a solitary pleasure. And there's menace in that situation, and I wanted to leave, but then again, I also had curiosity in me, so this poem was written after that. Subway. At first, the meaning won't come out from hiding. A piston motion, a tongue flickering, urgent but contained. What it does is not come. What it does is hold back and beckon, fire off its small explosion in your brain, desire to penetrate the bulwark distance. He wants you to see. He takes the weaponry of looking, bends it back. The boy miles off, safe. The boy untouchable on the far platform. Such a fortress built between you, such a crow's nest distance. And the smile you can't see says, so far off you don't exist. But you are here, and his shape pins the air above the tracks. Lit figure in a black space any eye can enter. Not public, this place he makes, hammering the locked dark with his fist in the slip between rush hours. Private, though you're invited in. The boy leans forward, propped by nothing, his prick in his hand, lost in the glittering latitudes of white, identical tiled walls, then seen, then unseen. Small crux of flesh, forest of rusted girders, lost context, buried city, nothing enters without a toll. And tunnels into it, and tunnels out, open in the shadows, valves velvet with soot, the thought opening and shutting, the train is coming, the train will never come. The ending of the boy's tension, crescendo, holds back, keeps refusing to yield to you, to him, insists it will stay, insists it will always be about to end, nagging ghost of the choked off, the buried, the way a child stands still and holds her breath until her lips darken, carotids blue and knotted in the frail neck. See me, watch me die. In the dark he will not come. In the dark his work has no reward. The cap tipped down, he could be anyone. One tile, one shout inside the city's wash of sound, lottery of flotsam on the downtown platform. On the walls, urgent scrawls. In a cradle of sand, an endless storm blows. But words are old, thoughts oxidize. Exposure to the rush hour burns, the breathed air burns. There is a war, there always is. And words go missing from the messages that line these walls. Signs papered over signs. At, place name erased. 24-hour workdays fill in order for 5,000 body bags. Signs speak quietly, signs whisper, and workers work overtime, work nights. Nights, the bones, tendons in the white wrist pumping, pulling, so much work to be done to accomplish one small explosion. The neurons fire, the mind feeds on the spark, meaning. Yes. Motion of stitching? No. Engines? Yes. Motion of pistons. Beneath the shut-tight lid, beneath the hood of any machine, obsessive repetition, invisible hands. It's quiet, the dark air, secretive, inviting this dark cave, smelling of piss, hidden, though he insists you see, and you work hard to see. and you work secretly, not to be seen seeing. Yes, anyone can enter it like this, the private sector of this public darkness.
Your work definitely creates a dialogue between different peoples and crosses cultural boundaries and has a lot of electricity behind it. And people are recognizing your work, and your book, Leaving Saturn, is doing really well. But I recently read a review where the reviewer was trying to present you as a poet that had kind of made it in Philly, or brought his experience from growing up in certain neighborhoods into your work. And I see your work as a little more broad than that, in a broader context. You have a lot more influences from around the country, global influences, and I know you've studied with other people. Did you read that review? And I mean, some writers don't read the reviews, but did you? And did you agree with it, or do
I
you?
anticipated the review, and I was happy that I did get reviewed. However, I do know that there's a particular dialogue around urban environments, and normally that's if you're a writer of color, or an artist of color, or a businessman of color, a lawyer of color, and you're from the city, then somehow you came up out of the dredges to become this paradigm of success that is often tutored and connected with what it means to be an American.
That's the only way a reviewer like that can see such a success.
Well, exactly, and for me, it's a very interesting paradox, whereby if you do write about where you're from, and that's definitely what we tell students, right, what you know. Unfortunately, what the other side of that is that people are going to bring to your writing what they think they know about it, and you have to somehow navigate that and offer up something new and fresh. So the disappointment was that while urban environment is a focus of mine, and as I travel and live different parts of the country, I find myself longing and trying to hold on to those memories of Philadelphia. Whereas if I was living there, probably I'd be writing about, Eastern Shore, Maryland, or something like that,
You do write a lot about community. I know that has influenced your work a lot.
Huge. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the various communities out of which I've learned and grew, including Cave Canem and Darkroom Collective, and writers up in Northwest Oregon, and the community of writers down in New Orleans, Peter Cooley and Kay Murphy, and just a host of people have been important to me as an artist, but more importantly as a human individual, which is ultimately
World
is
citizen.
what I want to reflect in my work.
Well, I think your work already does that, and you also have this positivity in your work. You talk about Sun Ra dealing with his anger, and I think a lot of your work kind of presents a positive aspect to a world that could have been in angering or in.
I think it's another way of expressing anger. It's to offer up a wall of hope.
Positivity.
Yeah, exactly. Which isn't to deny those impulses, that emotional kind of impulse, but ultimately for me, anger can also degenerate into kind of rage, and I'm not sure in the end. And in the end, for me, is the next level, which is violence.
Right.
I'm not sure yet. I'm not convinced yet.
That's as constructive.
No, and I'm not sure if it's as cathartic as offering up love and hope.
And did you hear that in the poets talking about the future, hope for the future?
Oh, that was stunning. That was absolutely stunning. That was more powerful. I'm talking about Mark Doty's and Marie Howe's presentation last night. The collage of voices and song ultimately is what it was, as this big gift and platter of love to the world after the tragedies and emotional and intellectual confusion that we're experiencing right now. So I was terribly grateful for that.
Did you get your line in there? Did you write one of them?
I didn't. I was encouraging others.
That's good. Major Jackson, author of Leaving Saturn. Any of Major Jackson's poems stand out for you?
Yes, absolutely. I think that this is the second time I've heard Major read, and I think Hoops is actually the elegy for our generation, the 35, 34-year-olds, that people who grew up really came to adolescence in the 80s. In the mid-'80s, and watched the descent of the American society, the inner cities, And I don't think any poem that we've seen from our generation captures that experience.
This poem is called Hoops, and I just wanted to point out a few things. My grandfather used to walk around the house every now and then when I became frustrated at one of the mammoth tasks that he gave me, and say that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And that was one of my favorite sayings of his. And BDP is Boogie Down Productions, is a rap group. And Totally et Leger is Augustine, that moment of conversion, pick up and read Latin books. Okay, this is the last poem, Hoops. And it's in 4 sections thus far, and I'm not going to read the section, just read it through. And trees fall so I can play ground with my ink, De La Soul. By a falling cyclone chain link fence, a black rush streaks for netted hoops, and one alone from a distance breaks above the undulant pack, soars. More a Sunday skywalk, he cups the ball, whirling his arm, swoops down a tomahawk. Radar, don't fly without me. It's Big Earl who coughs and downs his bottle of 40 ounce of Old E. Laughter makes its rounds. I cross a footpath of a city block, a short rut that snakes between a lush epitaph of dandelions and weed brush behind Happy Hollow courts. The ghost of a staircase echoes here, sign of lives lived, of souls lost. Faded hues of graffiti lines bombed on this wall. Faye says, don't stop the body rock. At gate's entrance, my gaze follows Radar and his half-cocked jump shot. All morning I sang hymns, yet weighed his form, his flash in the lane, quick stop to become skyborn. Elbow set, a pair of handlebars now, he flicks his wrist. Pill arcs through sunlight glare and splashes the basket circle of air. A boombox bobs and breaks beats on a buckling sea of asphalt. The hard driving rhymes of BDP, rousing that rowdy crowd of hustlers, tossing craps, waging fists, dollar bets, only louder. And one, more enraged, promises to pistol whip the punk who doesn't pay. He doubles up, blows a kiss, each dealer counts his days. I turn from these highlights, Spaulding's missile like meteors. Radar dribbles near. You're late, before I speak a word. My boy, shooting geometry. We laugh, Father Dave, coach at St. Charles, once let me play as a walk-on in hopes I would tutor Radar. Not even Pythagoras could awaken in his head the elegance of a triangle circumference. 4 years later, he's off on scholarship to UNC. I'm to study Nabokov at State University, proof of Pop-Pop's maxim, there's more ways to skin. If the slums out dungeon, schools out Bethlehem. Yet what connects those dots that rattle in hustlers' palms with Radar's stutter step and my pen's panopticon? It casts shadows, dark as tar, as we begin our full court run. A brick off the half-moon side, in waves we sprint. No set offense is past my bounce, his death lateral two-hand jam. Stark Sunday afternoon light, unending solo of sky, a parade of leaps and weaves fortifying our store of groans, each glistening muscle surging towards the body's curative peaks. Nimble, sprung, absorbed in our picks, touch and rolls, we swerve across haloed turf, whose ceremony overruns suffering, and arpeggio of chuck, split-second lobs past a squad of sweat-back ghosts, pass, glide, post, pivot, look away, dish, follow through, swish. Radar backpedals as the net strings flap and swing to rest. The black top ripples, raising its curtain of steam. 5 ballers grudgingly exit and make for the next team. Top of the key, hand on hip. I point for art's sake and jest. A finger challenge Radar in a dunking contest. Just then, a car engine revs Oxford Ave, stalls, and peels out. Panther-like Camaro whose chrome wheels screeched to a stop. Its window, smoke-tinted, drops diplomatically. A frenzied rustling, successive blasts, shrieks and fumblings, the rusted base of pole where life snakes an open cut up to center court. There lay radar enfolding his heart. The ceiling in my room, a projector's canvas, the moon, a flurried cone of light to which I recite Brooks, Frost, Hughes, lying back in my mind, each book's a slide held up like a snapshot, giant stills illumined by that cyclops eye. Below bunk, my cousin stacks 10s, 20s, pacing corners till 12. He and the UMOB gang slinging plastic vials of crack, the curse sling of death. I'm gonna buy a Gucci watch, Air Nikes, hype gear to look fly. Dazed, he says, then cocks a Wesson. What spells in the ovals of dead men's eyes? Other circles festooned above my head, O's on the tongue and bitter to the edge. We die soon, soon. A darkness spreads, at first as clouds floating like this craft-spirited march, then arise faces of friends resting in caskets. Deshawn, Darnell, Lil Mike, Chantel, a slideshow whose carousel, double quick click, ricochet shots across this elegiac. Gazing its portraits, I muse, this ceiling's more their grave, then lower my eyes to toss my grief on the shelf of their ever-sinking coffins, beside that red rose laid for dear parting, and here rise from earth the hurt motto bred, as my pen's pitch of dirt pyramids my dread. Fuck tomorrow, that's how I'm living, kid, fuck tomorrow. Only was Tupac on the waves, thug to life. By song's end, he's martyred again. My cousin lounges back inside the wrapped refrain, fingering his square sack of spliff. He lip syncs his resurrected lyrics, his pain shrinks to drags of dialect. Morning, a waste truck grates by, the workforce inching forth. A bus at the corner hisses, and so radar life erases. Overnight, a muralist bombed this lot, a portrait, your daily news, all city, dunk. Inside the pill, R.I.P., the too few years him between the cupped hands of parentheses. By it, children mosey like indifferent supermen, passing the liquor store front where the least wise drunks line up as if for a wage, the state unrolling its cage. Dazed, I drift nowhere to go. A cortege of souped-up lowriders blares up the street. Beside me its ministry of beats, and boys, roving cool, alone, head not their own extinction. What use tolly et leger to their forsaken souls? Or the graffiti artists mock heroic tags making the city a cave. The legions of lines my hand inscribes dims for days. Thank you.